Picture the scene, me in the massive white vaulted Art Deco ticket hall of the Singapore railway station, contemplating the journey through Southeast Asia. I'm about to begin.
Ian makes it all sound so glamorous. He says contemplating. He probably was in dirty clothes, sweating bullets, wondering if his father was going to get him his passport on time because he had left it in his sister's apartment.
Shh, we weren't going to mention that. So, in 2009, I travelled over 2,500 kilometres.
That's 1,600 freedom units.
By land and sea, up Southeast Asia with a microphone looking for great vegan food.
When I first met Ian, I heard his recordings from Southeast Asia. I was really impressed by what he managed to do with a microphone and a duvet.
The mix of Indian, Chinese and other cultures has led to some amazing dishes and some vegan threads running through the region.
You'll hear from Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand and Cambodia, all places that I have to say I very much would like to visit.
With chefs, restaurateurs and expats helping me discover the hidden vegan foods of Southeast Asia.
Ah, yeah, the coconut ice cream is vegan.
Food so hidden that Ian never discovered how to make them. And if you don't know by now, this is the vegan option.
Just possible you've heard some of these interviews in a previous podcast I did, Verdant Reports.
I heard them when I was first internet stalking Ian. For those of you at home, his radio voice is much better than anything he says at home, especially before his first cup of tea. But for this show, we had a quick word with someone who knows the region really well, a tiny, dark-haired, loud geek, other than me.
My name's Lisa Green. I've been vegan for 14 years, and despite my Aussie accent, I'm half Asian myself, and my mother is from Malaysia. Southeast Asia actually, for what is considered surprising for many people, has quite a large vegan and vegetarian community. There are national vegetarian and vegan societies in many different countries. In Thailand in particular, with the tradition of Buddhism, there are certain religious festivals where only vegan food is served. Southeast Asian cuisine doesn't use a lot of dairy, for example. Singapore and Malaysia both have a culture of street foods, or what's known as hawker foods, and there are many of these particular stalls that are strictly vegan. There is lots of opportunities there for lots of delicious things.
So, you decided to start your trip in Singapore.
I had the chance to see my first niece for the first time if I went there. Her mum, my sister, lived in Singapore with her husband, and as it happened, my parents joined us for the last week, so it was, in fact, you'll hear them later.
So it was a big family get-together.
So I travelled up the Thai Malay Peninsula, then on to Thailand's Northern Highlands.
Do they have a Highlander like...
They have Highland tribes. Actually, they do. The peninsula extends from that Asian landmass, if I can just give you a sense of the geography, southwards towards the equator. And so there's a mix of the more established cultures, the Thais or the Malays, and Indian or Chinese communities. And because the south of the peninsula is part of an ancient trading route, they're called the Malacca Straits, connecting the Indian Ocean with the Pacific, there are more Indian and Chinese people there. So I asked Lisa, whose mother happens to be from that trading region, about this melting pot.
Malaysia is an ethnically diverse country. There are people there from all over the world and people whose ancestors came from all over the world. As a result, this has had a great influence on the cuisine of the area. It's very, very diverse. The area that my family are from has, over hundreds of years, had many different forces in control. The Dutch, the British, and the Japanese have all had settlements there because it was considered to be a major trading route. The Baba Nyonya cuisine in particular has a Chinese Malay style of cooking from Chinese people who have moved into the Malacca region several hundred years ago.
So in the tropical island city-state of Singapore, they tend to call the hybrid Malay-Chinese culture Peranakan.
So I almost knew nothing about the culture of Singapore before we started doing research for this podcast. All I knew, mostly about Singapore is that it's a massive city-state with very strict laws because several years ago an American was caned publicly for doing graffiti on the street. So I was wondering, when you went to Singapore, if you smuggled in vegan cheese, is that caning or is that hanging? What exactly is the punishment for that?
Well, they did sell T-shirts saying Singapore is a fine city and then listed all the things you could be fined for. But I don't remember vegan cheese, but I didn't really risk it, sadly. So when you combine this Chinese vegan thread with the local hybrid cultures, you get a vegan Peranakan restaurant. And when I managed to convince my family to go there, I had a word with the owner, Jack.
The unique part of it is spicy and sour. Slow cooking, and the tastes are mainly herbs.
Of course, I've got to try the food, starting with the Assam mock fish.
Oh, it's not quite as spicy as I was scared into thinking it was going to be. But it is rather eerie that it actually does look like fish. The noni curry is very potatoey, very mock meaty. And it's a curry, but it tastes a lot of lemongrass.
I think we must have taken the mock meat out, to be honest.
Yes, and everybody else ate the mock meat.
And that was one of the first recordings for one of my first podcasts. And apologies for the bad recording, the bad edits, but that's why.
I think it sounds good. But so Ian travelled by train and coach to the Cameron Highlands,
where they grow tea.
That was a real high point for Ian. So, Ian, when you went to this tea grower's paradise, did they let you roll around naked in a silo of tea?
No. Mainly Muslim country wouldn't let me. And then to Penang Island in the Malacca Straits, at the heart of that culture, where there's a 33-metre statue of the Chinese goddess of mercy atop a Buddhist temple complex with a vegan restaurant. And another Penang vegan restaurant, Lucky Yan, fed me a vegan version of the local fish broth.
I can tell this podcast is going to make me really hungry. So I was going to make a Penang curry recently, and Ian kept talking over and over and over again about how delicious the Penang curry was in Penang. So I told him he should probably do the cooking.
I was interested in why the owner of Lucky Yan, Chong, called himself a Buddhist, but was part of a movement called the Tao.
And he's not that Chong. But anyway, Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism being the main Chinese religions. So how do they and these new movements like the Qinghai flow in the Chinese Sea of Faith?
Chong emailed me about how the three fitted together afterwards.
The principles of Taoism are to preserve our spirits well. The doctrines of Buddhism direct us to get rid of our wrong desires and ambitions. Whereas the principles of Confucianism are to get rid of our pride and selfishness.
Another really interesting thing about Chinese Buddhist vegetarians is that they avoid some strong-tasting vegetables. The other day I was in a restaurant and they asked me if I could eat garlic or onions, which Chinese Buddhist vegetarians eschew.
After consuming these vegetables, our body will heat up and our mouth will be filled with an unwelcoming, pungent smell.
Oh, strong-smelling, pungent vegetables. That's why everybody has to eat garlic and onions together, so that everybody can be sneaky at the same time.
Unfortunately, those restaurants closed early as well. Hungry evening after hungry evening was I turned away by a restaurant that was packing up as I arrived.
Did you not learn the first time?
Well, I just assumed it was that restaurant until a waitress in a veggie place in Kuala Lumpur, the sprawling Malaysian capital, told me that their customers went to bed at a decent hour and ate well in advance.
Yep, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to eat well before bedtime. But Ian likes to tiptoe downstairs and have toast at midnight. But more on the Chinese tradition of health later on.
So I took trains and buses and boats. I stopped at a hippie resort on a Thai island paradise. I took an overnight train to Bangkok.
Thailand avoided being colonized, but its cuisine has managed to colonize the West. I love Thai food. It's sweet and spicy with plenty of coconut and herbs, and I really can't wait to visit there. But it wasn't until I had heard the original Verdant reports that I found out how little excuse Ian has for not being able to cook better. He had a half-day cooking lesson at a Thai veggie restaurant in Chiang Mai.
Yeah, it has to be a little bit spicy. Salad or soup or curry.
The only thing that's not spicy is mango sticky rice.
Or some stir fry, like a mixed vegetable.
That was Nen from a Taste of Heaven restaurant. And a lot of tourists do learn Thai cooking, and this class was taught in a vegetarian place owned by the Elephant Sanctuary in which I volunteered.
We're going to get to the elephants later, but firstly, cooking lessons. I can't believe I've never had any of the delicious things that Ian learned to make. But how was the food?
Oh, it was great, and I particularly like the coconut sticky rice. So in Thailand, there's a bit of a challenge I found avoiding shrimp paste, oyster sauce, and Thai's national fish sauce.
Fish sauce is just such a fascinating ingredient. They put fish sauce in a lot of different dishes in Thai cooking. But I study disgust, and one of my colleagues is interested in how smell is involved in disgust. So he's interested in sort of collecting disgusting smells. And one of the smells that he finds pretty much universally disgusts people is fish sauce. So it smells disgusting, but it's supposed to add a savory depth of flavor to a lot of different dishes. And when I lived in Austin, I was unknowingly eating fish sauce for months at a local Thai eatery. So obviously I can't tell the difference.
So I learned some useful Thai words. I carried that vegan passport with a written definition of veganism in Thai. And as well as the veggie restaurants, a lot of places are cooking everything in front of you anyway. And I got advice from a British vegan living in Thailand.
I'm Izzy. I've been living in Thailand for a year and a half. If you go to a restaurant that's labelled J, which is a red and yellow sign, it won't have fish sauce or oyster sauce in it, but you do have to check for egg and milk. But there are lots of Chinese delicacies in those kind of shops, including khao soi, which is a northern soup, which is particularly good in Chiang Mai. Actually, quite a lot of the Thai desserts that you wouldn't think would be vegan, and you'd think they'd use gelatine, are actually vegan because they use sticky rice to actually hold stuff together. So the things that look like jelly type sweets are actually often vegan, and they're very cheap and really tasty in the markets. And Chinese donuts, Platong Go, they're also vegan, and they come with green custard, which is made from pandan leaf. They eat them for breakfast here, but they're quite sweet, so I like to eat them for dessert. Ah, yeah, the coconut ice cream is vegan, and you can get 10 baht worth with sticky rice and peanuts and other bits and bobs stuck in it as well. It's great.
So let's not forget all of the wonderful elephants that you got to look after.
Oh, they were fantastic, and some of them were very cheeky. Now, I spent a while at the Elephant Nature Park, which is a great sanctuary in the north of Thailand, and you're hearing music played by the mahouts, the elephant keepers. It's a place where you feed and bathe and do the maintenance for the elephants.
Wait a second, you got to bathe the elephants?
Yes, every day they need a wash. So they go down to the river, and people give them a good scrub. And you've got to be behind the elephants because they can do you an injury when they stand up, and you have to be upstream of them because they're being hit by lots of cold water, and they will.
It's like
pee,
a big elephant toilet. Yes.
Yes. But that was great fun. With some quite dirty work as well. And the founder Lek is vegan and an absolute legend.
So, after you came from the Elephant Nature Park, where did you go?
I went to Cambodia.
And that's where you saw the Angkor temples, which are really famous. And also you found a vegetarian restaurant run by somebody, well, from a country that's not really known for being friendly to vegetarian cuisine.
I caught up with him upstairs in his restaurant called Champon in a breezy street in Siem Reap, the town closest to the Angkor temples, on a very sunny day.
Hi, I'm Nicolas. I came from France and I decided to open a vegetarian restaurant in Cambodia. I discovered, when I opened the restaurant, Cambodian vegetarian food, and I was really surprised because Cambodian products are very fresh. We use fresh products, especially herbs. We use so many different kind of herbs, and that's the difference maybe between Thai food and Cambodian food.
As I travelled through progressively poorer countries, it got harder for people to understand that I wanted vegan food. And Cambodia, recovering from the killing fields of the late 20th century, understands famine. Nicolas again.
I used to eat in a traditional restaurant, corner restaurant of small shop, and ate only rice soup with vegetable or rice noodle soup with vegetable. But you never sure it's only vegetable inside. So you can eat fried rice or hot noodle soup, and they always put some fish sauce. It's the reflex.
What can you do, and what can travellers in Cambodia do to make sure that they are getting vegetarian and vegan food?
My advice is to go to restaurants owned by foreigner people, because Khmer people don't really know what is vegetarian.
But this is not restricted to the developing world. In the vegan paradise of New York, 1/5 of the chefs who replied to a Time Out magazine questionnaire admitted that their vegetarian dishes weren't really vegetarian.
But my patriotic guide, M, did try to reassure me that because of that Chinese influence again, Cambodians understood vegetarianism. He even offered to set me up with a vegetarian relative.
You didn't take him up?
Well, I did say I'd be willing to interview her for a podcast. Eating locally was so much easier with M to translate, and there was this access to the culture. And as Nicolas explained, if Khmer, i.e. Cambodian food, is vegetarian, it's probably vegan.
Because Cambodian products use a lot of coconut milk and vegetable and herbs, and that's of course just vegan food.
So what's your favourite Khmer vegan dish?
Red curry is made with yellow curry paste and chili paste, and after sweet potato and tomatoes. That's maybe my favorite dish in Cambodian, because it's tasty but not so spicy, and I don't really like too much spicy dishes.
So that evening, on a table outside his restaurant Champon, in a narrow street, I tried that Khmer red curry and sampled the differences between Thai cooking and the fresher, milder Khmer taste. A bit more green ginger. The coconut milk is added later, so it's not as thick, it looks more like a soup. And it's milder than Thai, which I like. And it is very nice.
So, we come back to that Chinese influence.
I asked Lisa Green if that was reflected in the ethnic makeup of the region's vegetarian groups.
There's nothing that's sort of necessarily striking that it's people of a particular racial background or ethnic background.
That's interesting, because when I was in Cambodia and my guide was telling me about his the vegetarian relative he was trying to set me up on a date with, he put it down to the Chinese influence.
One thing you do find is the use of mock meats in vegetarian and vegan cuisine in Southeast Asia, and a lot of that is an influence from China, as that's where the tradition of mock meats were first developed by Buddhist monks.
That's funny, thinking about monks making mock meat, because in the West, of course, monasteries make things like beer or chartreuse. They don't churn out mock meat. How was it?
It's the same as what we get in the West. And they certainly kept me really well fed, because wherever I went, there were Chinese vegan restaurants feeding me mock meat dishes.
Yeah, here in London, the way that I'm most familiar with mock meat is the Supreme Master movement restaurants that are all around the world, but that I've lived close to a couple of them.
That movement's there. I saw lots of posters urging people to go veg, save the planet, particularly in Malaysia. And they weren't the only emerging religious movement I ran across.
But yeah, where does Chinese Buddhist vegetarianism come from? We need some proper egg-headed analysis. Oh, eggs. Oh, well. This is the vegan option.
So back in London, I paid a visit to Dr. Peter Flugel in the School of Oriental and African Studies and asked him why Chinese Buddhists are vegetarian when Thai Buddhists, for example, are not.
Mahayana Buddhism is more or less the only Buddhist tradition that has a vegetarian tradition explicitly. The other Buddhist traditions, of course, generally reject eating meat and fish, but which leaves poultry. Mahayana Buddhism originated in India. There's so many Buddhist schools. Some of the texts that have been written clearly state that bodhisattvas should not eat meat because of compassion. Another consideration is, of course, related to the theory of rebirth and reincarnation. You may actually eat one of your former relatives because they may have been reborn as some animal or other.
The other major Buddhist tradition, Theravada Buddhism, believed the Buddha did eat meat when it was offered, and indeed that's what killed him.
Yeah, in Austin, Texas, where I used to live, I was involved in the Buddhist scene somewhat. I went to Shambhala Center and I went to meditation weekends, and I noticed a really interesting complexity with Buddhists, whether or not they were vegetarian. Most of the ones that I knew were not. And I recommend a book highly. It's called Food of the Bodhisattvas. But back to your trip.
Yes. I mean, Dr. Flugel quoted from the Lankavatara Sutra, an early Buddhist scripture, where it seems to discuss the Buddhists being shown up by proper vegetarians.
Even those philosophers who hold erroneous doctrines will prohibit meat eating and will themselves refrain from eating it, which clearly indicates, in my view, a reaction to groups such as the Jains. But the Buddhist tradition is vast. There's so many variations.
Of course, there's a lot of complexity when it comes to the Buddhist faith tradition and eating animals, and we hope to uncover some of that potentially in a later episode. But you went to Southeast Asia for weeks. You ate all different food. You went to many different countries. What did you really learn about veganism on this trip?
I think, and of course, it was really nice to taste all those culinary traditions in places that veganized them. And I mean, although we think about the word vegan, invented in 1944 in London, actually, it shows me how you meet these traditions of compassion towards other animals that are in cultures all through the world.
Yeah, we think about veganism as sort of a Western thing, but a lot of the seeds of those ideas are much older, and certainly in Southeast Asia. We know one person who's not going to be coming to Loving Hut and sampling the mock meat with us anytime soon.
Our cat, Mazzy.
Yeah, she seems to be able to tell the difference. So next time we're going to be looking at the ethics and practicalities of vegan cats.
I do most of the work on the show, and I've had a bit of a busy time of it of late, so I'm sorry that this show's late, and the next one will probably be too. But you can get our shows as soon as they come out by subscribing in iTunes or Stitcher or your podcast provider.
If you want to hear more of us, we talked about our year in the special Coexisting with Non-Human Animals World Vegan Day episode. Also, we recently posted the full version of my interview with Dr. Julia Minson about why people judge vegetarians.
And if you want more vegan travelogues, you can hear other shows. You can hear Colin Patrick Kudrow's episode about her visit to the UK, or the recent Our Hen House road trip across the United States. Links in our show notes at theveganoption.org.
But those podcasts aren't going to be quite as exotic as this one this time, though.
Meanwhile, we would love to hear from you.
Comment at theveganoption.org or at Facebook/veganoption, or tweet at veganoption. Or if you mainly want discussed in psychology, you can follow me at Sentientist.
Email us, Ian at theveganoption.org.
And Diana at theveganoption.org, although you can just send your hate mail to Ian.
It's our show, copyright us. It's Rob Masters' theme, but this music comes from the Mahouts of the Elephant Nature Park.